All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the talk about CI/CD in ETSI NFV environment. My name is Gergely Csatáry. I'm working for Nokia, and I'm part of a team inside ETSI NFV called TST, and this team's chair is Pierre. Welcome, Pierre Lynch. And in this presentation, we will talk about how ETSI NFV thinks about CI/CD in the ETSI NFV environment, and how we are trying to identify the problems and bring solutions to the problems. We will talk about the process what we have. We will talk a bit about like the teams which are involved in this, and we will talk about the actual issues what we found and maybe some solution ideas, but not concrete solutions. So let me hand over to Pierre then.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. We thought the good way to start this is just to introduce a little bit of ETSI NFV and what it is and things that people don't know about it. So ETSI is a standards body based in Europe, so European Telecommunication Standards Institute, and they host a multitude of different standards bodies, technical committees, etc., the most famous of which is 3GPP. NFV is one of them. What ETSI provides is a framework, the logistics, the legalities, etc., and they help us do our thing. But the NFV group, or ISG as it's called, all the participants are the ones that do the work, okay? So we lead ourselves into whatever we want to do. It has 315 participants right now, and not all of them members. So you can be a participant in NFV without being an ETSI member. There's no requirement for that. It is an organization that is contribution-based and consensus-driven. And what that means is essentially a lot like here, where there's no top-down management saying thou shalt do this or that. Everything that is being done is because somebody proposed it, got a few companies to say a thumbs up, and then it got accepted and on you go. Okay, so there's no top-down. It is contribution-based, membership-based. It's divided, the NFV group is divided into 6 working groups, all handling their own areas. So the most famous are the first 2 that I've listed, IFA, Interfaces and Architecture and Solutions. Basically, IFA came up with the architecture, so that's the group that came up with the famous NFV architecture, and is also responsible for the information modeling between all the reference points defined in that architecture. Solutions working group, they go a step further and define the data models, okay? So they base their work, so it's IFA first, solution second. But then there's a few specialized working groups like EVE, Evolution and Ecosystem, security, of course, and then reliability, which looks at reliability concerns. And then there's us, the TST working group, which is responsible for 3 things: testing, experimentation, which was the almost 50 proofs of concept that were done with ETSI NFV, and also open source collaboration. So we work a lot with, we do some collaboration with OpenStack, a ton with OPNFV from the Linux Foundation, and we're starting to take baby steps with ONAP, and we already have a collaboration with open source MANO as well. So we are the spearhead of collaboration with open source. I drew the diagram just to show a little bit the relationship. The central part is IFA and Solutions by far, but everybody inputs into it, including us, including TST. And the way it works is we can come up with recommendations that they can accept or not, and I'll get into that here. The subject of our talk is actually a TST work item called Test 06, and it's DevOps and CI/CD for NFV, okay? Now, the cover page is printed there. Now, what's different about this is not a spec at all. What this is, we call it, in our language, it's called a report. And what it's going to end up being is a series of recommendations for requirements that will be input to IFA and SOL. And they may or may not get accepted. But look at it as what OPNFV used to call a requirements project. We study something in depth as much as we can, and then make a series of recommendations that can modify the architecture or the data information modeling to incorporate these concepts into the architecture itself. okay? So this isn't a spec yet. This isn't standardized in any way. This is a recommendation that may get incorporated a little bit later. Now, what we're looking at is this work item actually started a little while ago, and it's a little bit slow going because it's a bit controversial as well. And what we're trying to bring into ETSI NFV are some key targeted DevOps concepts, okay? Such as you thinking of softwareization of the networking functions as an opportunity, not a risk, okay? Just getting into that mindset with a complete automation, obviously. We're talking about mainly, and I'll point you down at the bottom of the slide, this work item focuses on the interface between vendor and operator, and we do focus on VNFs mainly, actually, uniquely. We're not focusing on the platform yet or on MANO or anything like that. VNFs only, and that interface between the operator, whoever it may be, and whoever vendor is supplying VNFs to them. Okay, so and we're trying to join that. So we're talking about CI pipelines, testing, automated feedback, tools, everything being automated, just like a good pipeline should be and a DevOps mentality should be. Cross-functional teams, cross-organizational teams, this will lead to it, but also working towards an agile process and mentality towards smaller, more incremental deliveries, such that you can fail fast, which is an expression I learned from Chris. I saw him in here a while ago. I love it. Fail fast, but also fail forward, in the sense that the previous presenter showed is you deploy something, activate it. If it doesn't work out, you deactivate it, reroute the traffic, and then fix it instead of doing a rollback. All these concepts I'm preaching to a choir, but for the telcos, they're not the choir yet. They still need to be convinced of this. And why is that? They think that this is their words, this is the feedback we get from them, is that they have specific requirements, pressures that require them to do things in a certain way. We can't get fully a DevOps model. I saw 4,000 submits a day or deployments a day of microservices. It'll take a long time before you can convince a telco operator to get that much of a microservice mentality, and especially for deployment. So we got to take baby steps towards it. And the reason is they do have different pressures, regulation being one of them. You know, they're under very intense regulation obligations for things like 911 or 112, along with location reporting. They are mandated to support lawful intercept. All these, like the last bullet says, all the regulation can and in fact is different across the world. So they got to deal with different things and depending on the jurisdiction. Very often, the regulation mandates standards. They have to follow standards. Okay, so that's another pressure that they have. Then there's things like FirstNet in the United States, and this is going to replicate itself all over the world at some point, where it's a first responders network being piggybacked over LTE in this case and 5G subsequently. That imposes certain please don't fail me now type of requirements. And then all of that leads to significant financial risk if it doesn't work out. So this is the pushback we get from telcos to go at this approach a little bit gentler. Now, we also deal with CI. So we brought in, and this is a direct contribution from the OPNFV XCI team, where you got to think about, okay, so if you got a CI pipeline, you got to be pretty strategic about how you deal with the test cases, and because you have limited resources, limited time, et cetera, so you have, XCI defined all these different test loops, which are either on a per code submit or commit basis, which is a basic smoke test. Did it break anything really basic? And then you go further and further along into a daily test run, weekly, and then pre-release as well, which may be bi-weekly if you're following true agile. And then each one of them handles different types of test cases, the different set. Because what you have is a collection of test cases that you have to strategically place in every type of loop And you have to balance the value of a very, very precise test case that could be in a daily run that could fail every time and then really slow you down versus having it on the weekly run when everything's running a little bit more smoothly. So that the developers in these teams will define test cases at the very beginning, which may or may not go directly into the daily run. It may go into the weekly run, et cetera. So there's a function in back there that somebody has to scratch their head and think about which test cases go where and continually manage this, because I drew the loops bigger and bigger. They're not meant to illustrate a volume of test cases. They're meant to illustrate time taken to execute. So you can't typically, in a typical environment, I know home, we can't do the full regression every day. It's just not feasible. And then nobody has infinite resources. So we have discussions like this as well. We deal with different use cases, and in this case, the use cases mean who gets involved in the process. And now we're thinking VNFs, right? So there's the simplest one where there's a VNF supplier and one operator. That's simple. But then the more typical use case is multiple suppliers into one operator, and the operator is responsible for integrating everything. But then there's also a third-party use case that we're considering as well, where we call it validator. I hate that name. It's an integrator, basically, but it's a third party that stands in the middle between the supplier and the operator that puts things together, then hands it off again. Okay, so this is a summary of the use cases that are dealt in this, but it's still valid. And then we talk about pipeline integration. Okay, so it's about as tight. There's other concepts that were brought out by TM Forum, like joint agile delivery, that we try to embrace, but there's a certain limit where you can get in a telco environment. So there is a little bit of a dotted line between them, but this is one of the use cases where multiple VNF suppliers have their own pipeline, which spits out a delivery to the input of the pipeline of the operator, and then it's handled from there. What's not illustrated here is on the operator side, they could have their own features, their own software as well that integrates along with the third-party VNFs. And then in this case, you have a validator in the middle. So it just sticks an extra pipeline in there, which they could add to their own software on top of that as well, and the operator as well. So these are all just the things that we're considering in this work item. Now, I'll hand it off to Gergely, who's going to give you the details about what's going on.
Thank you. Yeah, so now you have some picture about the different group of use cases. And during this work with the use cases, we identified different common functions. For example, the pool of VNF package. So this is one thing what is not specified currently in the ETSI NFV packages when the VNF operator asks for the VNF package. We should also solve the problem to authenticate this request and of course do some accounting and this kind of stuff on the VNF provider side. Also, you should recognize here in this picture is that now we have a living link between the VNF operator and the VNF provider. This is not a common thing. So this is also a new issue that we found, that there should be a connection between these two entities. Other common function or possibility is to push a VNF package. So in this case, the VNF provider initiates the push of the package. Usually this is when they have a new patch out or a new functionality out. And also in this case, we have to ensure that the package is authorized and it's going from a good source to a good target. So all of these things we should figure out how to design. Also, we realized that when we deliver a package to a VNF operator, there should be a validation for the package itself. So this means that when the package is delivered to the operator, there should be some kind of a smoke test executed. And also, the results of this smoke test should be sent back to the VNF provider. So again, now we have a connection, an active communication and live communication between the VNF operator and the VNF provider. Yeah, I just covered this. And this link where we send back the test results, this should be like active every time when the VNF operator runs any test on the software of the VNF provider. All results should be sent back to the VNF provider along with the logs and data needed to analyze the results, especially if there is an error. So the point here is that you are not just getting a call from your boss that something went wrong, but you immediately in a dashboard see that something is wrong, and you can reach all the data which is needed to fix the error, like you as an engineer working on the product. Talking about this, in a DevOps environment, the developers should have some kind of view about the operations. What's the status of the live elements? What is the health status if there are any problems, and so on and so on. And in this case, in ETSI NFV, we are now talking about two different legal entities. So now we are talking about, I don't know, Nokia watching Vodafone network elements or monitoring. But if we would like to make this DevOps thing right in telco environment, we should enable this kind of a connection between a vendor and trust, a connection between a vendor and an operator. So the VNF vendor can react if something is not okay on the dashboard. And again, for this, we need a connection between these two entities. Some more interesting things about the use cases, and partly Pierre already covered this. So we are now talking about the situation when the ones who are making the product are not operating it. So it's two different legal entities. And to make it more difficult, there can be one VNF provider which is providing software to several VNF operators. Or vice versa, several providers providing software to one operator, and the mix of all of these. So we are now talking about an end-to-end relationship. So it's not a single DevOps pipe what we are talking about, but a DevOps mesh or kind of things like this. So this will be difficult, we know, to handle all of these connections and create a specification which enables all of this and makes the trust between these entities. So these are the high-level use cases or the common functionalities in the use cases, and we identified some problems. We don't have solution for these problems. We have solution let's say we have the problems and we have some ideas how to solve them, but there were no contributions made to solve these problems yet. So this is, let's say, an open territory, what is covered in the next slides. So first open issue what we found is how to deliver the tests and the execution environment to the VNF operator. So to run the smoke tests, the VNF operator should get a set of test cases and something what can execute those test cases from the VNF provider. And that's because they are two different entities. You cannot assume that the VNF operator and the VNF provider are using the same testing framework and all kind of things. So we have to somehow include everything which is needed to run the tests and the test descriptions into the package what we are delivering to the VNF operator, so they can execute the tests and report back the results, and they can say that or they are accepting or not accepting or software. So that's one issue what we have to figure out how to do it. There are different options. There are different options also for the entity which runs these tests. So the tests can be run by a separate test VNF, a whole VNF, what we just deploy to test another VNF, or they can be run by a separate VNFC, what we just like add to the VNF. These are options that we have to investigate and figure out which one of them are working or not. All right, I already discussed told you about this feedback channel. I think this is one key thing for making this DevOps working in the ETSI NFV environment. We have to have continuous feedback from the VNFs to the providers. But the problem is that rightfully the operators would like to control when this channel is open and what is transferred in this channel. And also they would like to have some kind of a data obfuscation in this channel because, for example, they have regulatory requirements not to give away personal data. But they still need to provide the logs of an error, but they cannot include some part of the data, so they have to just strip it out. And for this, some logic is needed somewhere, and this is one proposal to add this logic to the OSS layer, like a separate, I don't know, policy enforcing and data obfuscation engine, which is managing all the connections between the VNF providers and the VNFs. Of course, this logic in the middle would also know which VNF's data should be sent to which endpoint, because all of these, like the connections to the VNF providers, are some kind of, I don't know, receiving endpoints where you can push data to. Of course, we don't know yet what is the interface here, and I don't know what kind of firewalls should be opened for this, and all of these little details are not clarified yet. We just know that there is a problem what we have to solve. Also, we have a problem which is very ETSI NFV specific, let's say. So currently, in the ETSI NFV MANO architecture, there is no way to upgrade the software of a VNFC. So you cannot upgrade, let's say, one library in a VM image without delivering the whole VM image. And not just the VM image, which is the VM image of the VNFC, but all the VNF images of the whole VNF. So this could mean that if you have a security issue in an SSH library, you are ending up delivering, I don't know, a 10 gigabytes of package to all of your operators, which is not very optimal. So for this, we have to provide a mechanism to update a software inside a VNFC. But the problem is that in the current ETSI NFV architecture, the VNF package, which contains all the disk images of a VNF, is signed by the VNF provider, so it's somehow logged. And there is no mechanism to put, let's say, increments on top of it, because every VNF package should be capable so every VNF package should be in a state that you can deploy the whole VNF from it. So it's not a working solution to deliver only these deltas and have a logic somewhere to deploy that. So this is a problem. We don't know the solution yet. But it's a very nice problem. We already had some hours of arguing about this. Yeah, we will have more fun about this update thing. All right, so summarizing the thing. So TST6, that's the name of the document. It's an ongoing work, so it's not finished yet. It introduces DevOps into the ETSI NFV MANO architecture. And it's a study item, so even if the document is approved and finished, it will take some more steps to reach the phase when we have an approved specification to cover these things, which is like a good and a bad thing at the same time. Good thing is that we are ready to accept feedback. So if anybody, if you have a good idea how to solve any of these problems, or you have some concerns, then just speak up. We will have a Q&A within some minutes. And then we will provide these recommendations to IFA, and most probably we will need to work on them. I think that's how it goes nowadays, which is okay. And according to our current view, most probably this will change the definition of the VNF package, the handling of the VNF package, and my opinion that there will be a new interface between the VNF provider and the VNF operator, which is like a standard requirement or something to support DevOps, my view. And I provided a link to the document, which is not very useful because you cannot download this slide set from anywhere, but but yeah. So if anybody is interested in the document, just let's have a discussion after the session, and I can send the document. And that was it. Are there any questions or solutions or concerns?
What happens if the developer pushes a VNF, and so I guess the operator will have the ability to decide whether it's going to go into production or not, right? So there's a check there. So let's say that it goes into production, and then you build a service chain with multiple VNFs together to create some service. But one of the VNFs doesn't work and crashes. So will it impact all the other VNFs in that service chain? Essentially, that service will break because you might have let's say video compression and then video optimization, different things, right? So I guess what I'm saying is if there's a VNF that's broken, it can impact other VNFs that are still healthy because they're service chained together. So if you've broken the chain now, you're not, I guess, so the impact of a VNF that breaks could extend beyond the VNF itself. It could impact the whole chain. Is that a case that can happen?
Yes, and that's why the pipeline will include a staging area first. It wouldn't go straight from supplier into operational network. It would go through a staging test area where they can stick it through their whole pipeline first and hopefully have that network service tested before you ever get it deployed and activated.
The other question I have, let's say there's a VNF that's running that's got 1,000 active sessions. You want to deploy a new one. How do you cut over the sessions, the existing sessions, to the new one without disconnecting everybody?
There's a few options dealt with in the introduction where you activate it and then invoke the load balancer to send a few sessions its way without a few new sessions, without actually existing you leave and you just activate it with a few sessions as an initial test. And then once it does, it's proven and it's not falling down or anything, we're talking production, then you modify the server load balancer to send all new sessions there and let the others bleed out. Then deactivate the old one.
Yeah, if you have...
Stay on for a long time.
That's the problem. So
that's the problem. So if you have sticky sessions, so your architecture is built up in that way, so you cannot move your sessions, then you have to wait until all the sessions are finished, or you have to have a timeline, and then you...
Somebody can be VPN for days, right?
Yeah.
yes, a GTP tunnel can last for days as well. So it is an issue, but how to transfer those is something we haven't looked at yet.
There's no mechanism to migrate sessions in progress to another VNF.
It's application specific.
The ultimate answer.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Two. Lady first.
My view, like you mentioned earlier, limitation of updating the VNFC instead of providing image. But as a kind of practical use case, when often you have a telecom application, isn't it quicker and make it more ready to the end user just to have new image that contain everything instead of upgrading component per component?
I think both of these should be supported. So the VNFC component update is needed when you have to update really small part of your VNF, and your VNF is very big. So usually, like one VNF is several gigabytes of data, and in good case, like one VNF provider can support like several hundreds of operators. So push out all of those gigabytes from one VNF provider is very slow. And this is why if we have the capability to deliver only components, that will make us capable to react fast to a security issue or a bug or something like that.
So I was honestly be distracted sometimes, so I may have missed something, so feel free to take it also online. So the first question was more about logistics in the community. So you talk about validation tools and jobs that of course run along the pipeline at some point. I was curious to understand who is responsible for those jobs, if it's more the VNF provider, if it's the service provider, if it's you as a community, as an organization, if you have a QA. I work in a very similar community, and often it is very difficult to get different parties agrees on who does what, right? So,
Do you want to?
I'll let you answer.
it's also more about tools. What are the specific tools you can share?
Let me answer the second one first. We never specify tools. We don't get that specific. And we do provide a bunch of open source examples, but we don't get into tooling itself. We leave that, it doesn't belong in what we do at ETSI NFV. Plus it would create a battle that without any end, right? So open source is okay. Anything else is out of bounds as far as that's concerned. For the first one, you're right. And if you see any presentations this week about the OPNFV XCI project, they deal with that quite well, where the XCI is OPNFV having cross-community CI with 4 other communities. I think it's ODL, OpenStack, FIDO, and God, I forget the fourth. Sorry, fourth. But they've got these integrated pipelines where everybody has their own responsibility for making sure the configuration works once it gets into the OPNFV pipeline type of thing. So basically, OPNFV can pull the latest versions of each one of those 4 communities, integrate it into the pipeline, and off you go. That's a perfect situation, which is hard to implement here because of what Gergely was saying. You're talking about really different legal entities. And especially on this one here, they're not going to accept anything in their pipeline unless they want it, and where they can push a button and say, nope, we're not ready for it. So there's a lot more mechanisms to be thought of because of this environment, right? Now we're advocating as much, integration as you can, and who owns the pipelines is they each own their own pipelines. And they deliver something that's deployable into the next pipeline, and then it starts again. And it personally, I just look at it as, this development environment. The supplier has his or her own test environment here, deploys into this environment. That is viewed as just one more input into the pipeline, and then it starts again, right? That's how we're looking at it now. We have to respect the dotted lines for the time being. Having said that, again, there's other people that came up with concepts like joint agile delivery, which TM Forum advocates that pretty strongly. We're not opposed to it. We just don't think it's realistic at this point in time, given the reasons I had in my slide on why our telco is different. Yes, sir.
Just one comment to the same question around image formats and how you ship them. I mean, this is a problem that's been solved in the Linux distribution.
Of course.
Where donkeys used, right? Like, why aren't they just using a union file system and registry inside local repositories, right? Like, it's pretty standard these days. I don't know. This is the same thing with broadband forum. It's like these organizations exist in these silos.
They're very aware. I'll disagree with you there. Everybody's really aware, in fact. It's just that they don't find it appropriate to adopt it at that level yet. Okay? Again, refer to the wire telco's difference. The cattle not pets isn't entirely adopted at a telco yet. There's just too much risk, too much financial risk. They will. And in fact, they love saying at ETSI NFV, the group, and by the way, it's the same companies as participate in all the open source, right? They all know what's going on. They're all very aware, but the architecture doesn't preclude containers. And this whole discussion that Gergely had is microservices to a coarse grain, you know, but what we're advocating is being able to update one of the micro, or call it what you want, services within a VNF package individually. They already can scale individually. They can breathe individually and all that. They just can't get updated. We both think, and most of our group thinks, that's a hole. And we need to patch that hole by allowing the capability to upgrade whatever granularity you had designed your VNF with. How are we doing for? Oh, God, tons. Anything else? Does that address you as well? Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Then thanks for your time and have a good summit.
Thanks for hanging out.